Beyond our intricately teeming homeworld lies the great hollow, the infinity of space, the universe. Its never-endingness is unimaginable. If you began traveling through it at a speed approaching that of light itself, the universe would seem as a yawning chasm of eternal emptiness. At first, you might be excited. Ooh, you'd exclaim. Cool. But soon, all too soon, this would pall. Oh, is it still going on? You'd venture. Then unease would set in. Surely this must end soon, you'd ask. Until you were crying out, no, no, no! Make it stop! What would that be like? Please welcome Helen Keane with the very final episode of It Is Rocket Science!
Thank you. In this series, we've been taking a low-budget, highly subjective look at the history and future of space travel. As usual, I'm assisted by my sophisticated electronic narration machine, designed to provide a simulation of erudition, gravitas, and scholarly dignity. Sadly, we ran out of AA batteries earlier in the series, so he's now powered by 2 electrodes stuck in a potato. Please welcome the voice of space.
A formulation.
So today, we move from the history of rockets towards thinking about where space travel might go next, given what we now know about how huge the cosmos is, which I would say makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end, only I don't want you to picture me with a hairy neck.
It seems the universe is constantly, inexplicably expanding, like a great celestial water lily, or Tesco's. This is an uncomfortable realization. Most people would prefer a universe that stopped all that and concentrated on quality over quantity. Like Waitrose.
Even though that would mean, as it were, I could only afford to dine from the universe's don't delay, eat today bargain bins. Even our knowledge of how big our own universe is constantly expanding. Less than a century ago, in the 1920s, the great debate was whether or not our relatively small, as it turns out, galaxy was all there was to the universe.
The 1920s and 30s were also the heyday of space-based confectionery. Astronomical enthusiasm collided with chocolate, resulting in the Mars bar, the Galaxy bar, and the Milky Way.
Today, we believe that our home, the Milky Way, is just one of maybe 100 billion galaxies, each containing 400 billion stars, sprinkled oh so sparingly throughout a universe that has been expanding outwards for at least 13 billion years. Chocolate bar manufacturers haven't really caught up with this revelation.
Do worlds like ours circle these billions of stars? And if they do, are we destined always to be a lonely planet because we cannot connect and speak to them?
There are obvious parallels between what experts say about finding life on other planets and what your parents say about finding you a date when you're over 30. You often hear,
we know someone is out there somewhere.
But at the moment, we only have the technology to pursue our quest for a significant other world as far as the outer reaches of our solar system, which is, like, comparatively, as far as the Yates's wine lodge on the local high street, in that one feels with great certainty it does not contain appropriately intelligent life.
But stories persist to this day of strange sightings and abductions.
A few years ago, the Ministry of Defence opened their files of UFO reports for all to see online. I had a look, and I think my favourite sighting occurred one night in Exeter in August in 1987. For 2 hours, several witnesses watched a very bright triangular UFO from St David's Post Office. They described its movements and reported that it was seen heading towards the plough. And I love that they clarified the constellation, not the pub.
So, if life exists on other planets, how would we visit our nearest galactic neighbours and introduce them to the glorious, improbable, and sophisticated flowering of our own culture? And Alvin and the Chipmunks too, the sequel.
Well, I travel around the country quite a lot because I do stand-up, and I travel by coach because it's going really well. So I do feel quite qualified to talk about the crucial questions here: speed, distance, and time. Earth's nearest star system is Alpha Centauri. It may possibly have Earth-like planets, but it is about 25.8 trillion miles away. To travel that far by National Express coach would take around 58 million years, and I'm just not sure it's worth it even with a fun fare for a £5. Even by rocket, travelling at 40,000 miles an hour, the journey from Earth would take over 70,000 years. So, our current conventional chemical-fueled rockets just won't cut it as a means of interstellar travel. We need something much better and much faster. But might travel at such superhuman speeds change people?
In the days of the very first locomotives in the early 19th century, it was suggested that high fences should be built along their routes, in case the sight of the British countryside whizzing by at a death-defying 8 miles per hour drove all the passengers insane.
In 1835, the British railway engineer Thomas Treadgold said,
"The prospect of any system of conveying passengers exceeding 10 miles an hour is extremely improbable."
Some trains now, in theory, can reach speeds of up to 361 miles per hour. Obviously not British ones. Though I always find even the change in speed and journey time from coach to train is dizzying. In fact, I think it might have been too much for one fellow passenger, as the last time I caught a train, this announcement was made.
I hope you are enjoying your journey on the 1410 to Leeds. Just to let you know, the buffet car is now closed as someone has been sick in it. For those of you in Coach G, there will be no cutting through here to Coach H today.
Journeying regularly to the stars may seem impossible to us now, but to our distant ancestors in, say, the Stone Age, that 3-hour train journey from London to Leeds would seem, well, almost as wonderful and unlikely.
Though they might experience disappointment upon arrival.
But there really could be some very odd consequences to travelling extremely quickly, and this is because of space-time.
Space and time may be the same thing. The Incas said so almost 1,000 years ago, and the people of the Andes still keep this knowledge today. But they also keep wearing those unflattering, tufted woolly hats and playing the nose flute. So perhaps it's just something to do with living a bit too far up a mountain. See also the Welsh.
What this means is that there may be circumstances where space travel is also time travel.
If you were to set off in a rocket traveling very fast, approaching the speed of light, time would slow down for you inside the rocket. After turning around and returning to Earth, you would look pretty much the same. You'd feel as if only a short amount of time had passed. But more time would have passed on Earth, and you'd see your friends and they would seem to you to have aged very quickly.
Although you don't need to spend years in space to see your friends age like that. Just try meeting up with them after they've had kids.
Travelling forward in time is something that probably all humans are familiar with. But what about going backwards?
This worries physicists. Stephen Hawking tried really hard to prove that it would be impossible to build a machine to go back in time, but even he couldn't manage to prove it could never happen. Scientists and science fiction writers are enthralled by the grandfather paradox, i.e., whether it might be possible to go back in time and totally mess things up, e.g., by killing your own grandfather before your mother was born and thus preventing your own existence, thereby preventing you being alive to go back in time to kill your grandfather, so, etc.
You know, I can still remember the first sweets given to me by my grandfather when I was a boy. Oh no! My terrifying physicist prodigy from the future! Not only are you flouting the Novikov self-consistency principle, you're most certainly not having any of my special golden candy now, you little
Accidentally preventing your own existence. That is the time traveller's paradox.
And accidentally reading a load of schmaltzy nonsense. That is the time traveller's wife. I did not enjoy being Bluetoothed to that Kindle. But perhaps we could not only travel forwards and backwards, up and down, but also to the side a little bit. Many cosmologists believe that there are an infinity of other universes, parallel to us, like the pages of a book whose pages are universes.
Science fiction among us imagine other universes where, say, it's the future, but the Roman Empire still rules the world with, like, totally way cool hover chariots.
But the reality is literally mind-boggling. Infinity is beyond us. Like being in an eternal hall of mirrors, where each image is a fraction of a millimeter more distorted than the next. Millions upon millions of increasingly misshapen, laughing faces, each doing something practically but not entirely identical to their neighbor, repeating over and 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 over again until your mind is shuddering with incomprehension at the multiplicity of minutely differing banalities. See also Facebook.
Our Our universe is ruled by 4 fundamental forces: gravity, electromagnetism, and the strong and weak nuclear force, which I've never been too sure about, but I think maybe there's something to do with how much milk you put in. But other parallel universes would probably be subject to different forces, which might make life as we know it impossible there, or simply different, or maybe better. How wonderful to experience one of these parallel universes just for a moment.
So on my iPhone, there's an app for that. Perceive a totally random universe.
Oh, can I have a look? Wow, I can see a universe very similar to our own, but where the forces that weld atoms and create worlds are ordered according to the charter of BBC Radio 4.
The primary force here seems to be that the inhabitants of this universe are entirely untroubled by any sport or loud music. Godlike uber beings benevolently enforce the forces.
The second force is urbanity. I say I'm awfully sorry, but do you think you could hold your protons a little closer together? I know it's a terrible squash.
The third force is good judgment. Do we really need 9 billion trillion stars? I think that's a little showy.
And the fourth force is Moneybox Live.
Recently, a remarkable number of exact solutions have been found to Einstein's equations that allow for wormholes. It's possible we might actually be able to use tiny holes in the very fabric of space-time as shortcuts to travel vast distances across whole galaxies between universes. And perhaps one day, travel through a network of these extraordinary wormholes will be as ubiquitous and ordinary as our public transport system is now.
Just to let you know, the wormhole is currently impassable as someone has been sick in the wormhole. For those of you in the Horsehead Nebula, there will be no cutting through to Swindon Central today.
The fathers of modern rocket science who began our story were all fascinated by the idea of escaping the familiar to find fresh worlds elsewhere, to dream of discovering a perfect world somewhere out there, to never again know the feeling of heartbreak or failure, or of travelling by National Express funfair.
Right now, there are obsessive scientists and passionate amateurs out there looking up and imagining. Imagining spaceships with great solar-powered sails hundreds of miles across that might be built entirely in outer space and energised by the beams of 1,000 moon-based banks of lasers as they weigh anchor for the stars. Really, the beautiful universe is out there, waiting.
Jules Verne wrote this in From the Earth to the Moon in 1865. In spite of the opinions of certain narrow-minded people who would shut up the human race upon this globe, as within some magic circle which it must never outstep, we shall one day travel to the moon, the planets, and the stars, with the same facility, rapidity, and certainty as we now make the voyage from Liverpool to New York.
We've already taken the first steps out into the universe. It's not a question of whether we'll go further, only when. When will men and women once again slip the surly bonds of earth to touch the face of God?
Actually, can you stop touching my face, please? It's making me feel a bit uncomfortable.
Thanks for listening. Goodbye. Bye.
It is Rocket Science, starred Helen Keane, Peter Serafinowicz, and Susie Kane. It was written by Miriam Underhill and Helen Keane, with thanks to Marcus Chow. The producer was Gareth Edwards.